Welcome to the first episode of Primetime Live, where you get to call in and be a part of the show. Also, you can text or use the chat option within the live stream. So feel free to interact with us. That's what the show is all about, is bringing the world to you, but also allowing you to discuss it. Of course, we know that there's a lot going on in the world, and we will get to that in just a few minutes. But first, I thought we would start with just an introduction to the show, to myself, and how you can tune in. Now, you can watch Jess TV live on Roku TV, on SSH 101 TV, as well as NCG Television Network, Meta TV, stream 24/7 at jessfm.ca as well. So lots of options for you to watch the program, and if you don't catch us live, then you can always watch the replays. Once again, you can do that 24/7 at jessfm.ca, so make sure that you tune in. Now, Jess FM is a station that has been growing for several years and has been voted one of the top stations in Lethbridge, Alberta. They really have stepped up their game, and they have many different programs to choose from, so you don't have to just watch my face. You can watch the other programs as well, so tune in and check it out at jessfm.ca. I am James Cousineau, and I will be your host of Primetime Live every Thursday night at 8 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. We are going to be bringing stories from not only the local community, but across Canada and around the world. We'll open up the phone lines and the WhatsApp lines so you can call in and be a part of the conversation as well. And for those of you who are looking to do that, the phone number is 368-997-6741. And you can also use that number on your WhatsApp app. So that's perfect as well to interact with us here live on the show. So don't be shy. Make sure you call in, send your messages or your thoughts in the chat room, or you can also send us a text to that same number, 368-997-6741. Welcome to the program. Tonight, we were going to have Ron James as a special guest and the very first guest on Primetime Live. Unfortunately, he is in a small town in Nova Scotia where the internet is a bit choppy. So we'll be doing a special episode over the next few days featuring Ron James, the Canadian comedian, actor, writer, and all-around great guy. If you have not heard of Ron James, by all means, check out his website at ronjames.ca. He is a comedian and intellect that has been working his way around Canada and the world over the last several decades in the comedy field. He's a writer. He is very accomplished in all that he does, but he's also recognized as the quintessential Canadian from the East Coast. So we're very excited that we'll have Ron James on the show over the next few days. Generally, we do a Thursday night at 8 o'clock show, but we will bring you a special episode just because it's Ron James. Come on now, who doesn't want to have some fun conversation with him? So watch all of the social media platforms, and you will be able to keep up and be notified of different episodes as well as what's coming up on the future episodes. So again, don't be shy. Make sure you interact. Leave your comments and your suggestions. As we start out tonight on the backdrop, we are going with a general theme of scenes from across the country, the Rocky Mountains through to the Maritimes. And of course, for all of our friends up in the Northern Territories, don't worry, we will have episodes where we feature different towns such as Dawson City, Whitehorse, and others from coast to coast to coast. And we love our country, so that's what's so great about having this show, is being able to not only discuss all of the current affairs and topics, but also issues that are important from a Canadian perspective, including your comments. However, don't be shy. If you are watching from anywhere around the globe, you are welcome to join the conversation as well. Don't be shy because you're not Canadian. Speak out, speak up, and be heard. That's what this platform is all about, is giving people a place that they can talk. And we have very few restrictions on the conversation. Of course, keep it respectful, and of course keep it within common sense of the program. We will be live, so we don't censor you on the show. However, if there's profanity and such, of course we may beep out certain words for the replay, but again, we just ask that you use some decorum and some respect when you're dialing into the program. Once again, if you want to talk live on the show, then you can call 368-997-6741. And also, don't forget, again, that you can watch Jess TV live on Roku TV, SSH 101 TV, the NCG television network, Meta TV, and of course, don't forget streaming 24/7 at jessfm.ca. So let's get on with the program, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight we're going to discuss various topics. Of course, we know already that we're going to talk about some current events, different things going on here in Canada, across the border in the United States, and around the world. So we'll get into that. We're also going to go in a bit more depth about the missing children in Nova Scotia, in Pictou County, that still have not been located. The police are investigating, and we'll get into that a bit further in terms of where things are at this point. It's been a story that has captured the world's attention, and we will bring you the latest. We'll also take a look at the film and television industry across Canada and how it is really hitting a lull. Typically, you see the ebb and flows of the entertainment industry. You'll have peak seasons and different years where it will kind of go up a bit, down a bit, and fluctuate. But over the last 5 years, the industry has really struggled to get its feet back under it. We have seen a lot of development of new studio space in Western Canada and also in the Toronto region. But also, did you know that there is a lot of push from the prairie provinces to get in on the action? We'll go into that a bit further as we go. Now, July has really been marked by a complex interplay of conflicts, shifting domestic policies, and persistent socioeconomic challenges that we know. But internationally, humanitarian crises in the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Ukraine continue to escalate, as well as the humanitarian issues that are, of course, happening within Palestine and the Gaza Strip region. So this is something that is very concerning. The U.S. government just destroyed millions and millions of pounds of food that were nearing expiration because of the fact that it was not distributed. And this is a direct result of the policy to eliminate the U.S. aid program. This means that the food gets wasted instead of delivered to those who are so desperately in need around the globe. Another sad fallout from the current administration and the real imbalance when it comes to the political system in the United States. So we'll watch and see how that plays out. But again, it's really sad to see millions and millions of pounds of food going to waste instead of being distributed to those who need it the most. Now, when we look at the aggressive domestic policies, the domestic international policies, of course, we know that that's very concerning. But also when you look at education and immigration in the United States, that's becoming a very big issue as well. With the elimination of the Federal Department of Education in the United States, of course, that's going to have a direct impact on the individual states and the regional school districts throughout the country. The program, when you look at the Federal Department of Education, one of the main programs is, of course, the food program, food stability and security for the schools to be able to provide free lunches for those in need. This has been directly impacted by the reduction and eventual elimination of the Federal Department of Education. Of course, Donald Trump wants to put a lot more responsibility, and in turn, that would give a bit more flexibility to the states to redirect different aid and resources where they're most needed. But I believe that there was not a real solid plan put in place in order to make that transition. And that, I think, is causing a lot of the chaos and the confusion in the US. Coupled with that, of course, that they are not transferring the funding that would go with those programs. So it's really a challenge when you look at program elimination without any type of transitional plan to bring it forward. It's something, again, that's happening in the US, but we'll watch it very closely because it has a big impact on Canada as we move forward on policy. The reason why I say that is because there are other issues such as immigration, such as trade, such as, I can go on and on about the different policy that is being implemented without any real structure within the United States that has a direct spillover effect on on Canada. Now, when you look at that, of course, we're going to trade. Now, the trade issue has become a very big problem for the global community, not just Canada. The United States under Joe Biden had made commitments of certain Patriot systems and Patriot missile systems that they were going to supply to Ukraine. This being said, the US has now used it as a transactional process as opposed to an obligation that they had to help support Ukraine. They instead are selling essentially the Patriot missiles and the systems, including Patriot batteries and other things. They're going to be selling them to Germany and the EU. Now, the EU and Germany will then transfer them over to Ukraine. So essentially, the US is not going to provide those systems unless they're paid for by other countries. That goes against the policy and the approvals of Congress in the United States that had already approved the distribution of those Patriots to the Ukraine. And again, it really sets foreign policy and international support back decades, if not even more, when it comes to the reliability of the US as a partner in security. The problem with that also goes deeper because as we see, I've touched on the trade, we've touched on national security, international security, and such. As Donald Trump further pushes away his allies and really breaks the trust of the US, it's not just an immediate impact that it's having. It's going to have a sustained and long-term impact on the United States markets, on their citizens, of course, because as trade is reduced, there's going to be less demand internationally for items from the United States. That transitions into less demand, less jobs for the people of the United States, and again, reduced income for others. At the very least, you'll see companies that are either transitioning to other markets. And when I say that, I'm talking about physically getting up and moving out of the United States at some point so that they can continue with international trade and not be impacted by the massive tariffs that are being levied against other nations. Now, it still appears that a lot of the mega base in the United States is still delusionally convinced that the tariffs are paid by foreign countries. Now, Trump is sitting there touting that he has raised $100 billion so far this year in tariffs. And a lot of his base is really excited about this. They think it's great for the United States, it's great for America, but they are not understanding that that cost is being paid by US companies, US purchasers, and ultimately the US consumer. Now, as the consumers start to see the prices rise, because a lot of the companies had purchased a bulk amount of products to store up, knowing that tariffs were coming, and they were trying to avoid the impact of some tariffs by stocking up and hoping that it would settle and that trade agreements would be reached. As that supply chain starts to dwindle, of course, they're going to have to start bringing in more product and start re-importing. Once that happens, then the price is really going to be felt at the cash register. And that's when Americans will start to really take on the added costs. When you look at Mexico, US alone, right now, one of the major suppliers of tomatoes across the US is Mexico. Claudia Sheinbaum, the Mexico president, has come out and very clearly stated that it's going to have a big harm on Mexico to have a 17% duty or tariff now placed on tomatoes. And I'm just using this as the one example. There's so many other things we could talk about. But that 17% is going to be passed once again to the US consumer. It is going to hit people in their pocketbooks. Their monthly household budgets are going to go up because their food budget goes up. When this happens, of course, you're going to see more food insecurity within the United States for the most vulnerable. Unfortunately, though, with the tax breaks and the incentives going forward in Trump's big, beautiful bill, as he calls it, it is looking after the wealthy and not those who are going to be impoverished or in a real financial and humanitarian need, essentially, throughout the United States. So it's going to have a major impact. When it comes to the US Canada Mexico agreement, of course, we know that when a automobile is constructed in North America, we send parts back and forth between Canada, the US, Mexico, and vice versa. Now, all of these components eventually get put together either in car manufacturing or assembly plants in Ontario or in the US and sometimes Mexico. Now, these potential tariffs, they are looking at not just a single tariff, but they will be charged as they go out and back in and out and, vice versa. So you're paying several duties on the one vehicle. And that is because you're paying duty on all of the components that were brought together to construct the final automobile or the final product. And that, again, is going to increase the prices exponentially, causing a real slowdown within the auto sale industry. And I'm not talking just passenger vehicles, but you're looking at commercial trucks, you're looking at buses. Any modes of transportation are a real issue. When you take into account the major multi-billion-dollar a year industry of the aeronautical and aerospace industries, Boeing has already seen a reduction in sales from China. China was to receive several Boeing jets and Boeing passenger planes, and they refused delivery because of the tariffs. They sent them back to the US. Now, this is something that I imagine we're going to see a lot more of if the trade issues are not calmed and settled down in the US. Of course, that also impacts the markets. The financial markets have been volatile. They have had a period of deep decline. And now that they are finally just getting resettled back up to pre-Trump era numbers and levels, of course, now he is increasing more threats on different nations. But interestingly enough, one of the nations that he is not threatening with further tariffs is Russia. He has given Russia 50 days in order to end the war with Ukraine. Typically, Donald Trump is known for saying 2 weeks on this, 2 weeks on that. Everything's always 2 weeks for Donald Trump. You'll see in 2 weeks. We'll know in 2 weeks. And, that is typical. But this time he's drawn a line in the sand of 50 days. The reason for that, according to a lot of analysts, is because Vladimir Putin expects to have this finalized in terms of his goals within 50 days. And in the predictions, they assume that there is going to be a major uptick in the attacks on Ukraine by Russia, whether that's through drones or other means. It is expected that it is going to be an all-out attack in order for Putin to reach that goal within the 50 days. Now, let's not forget, though, that Vladimir Putin had also wanted to or assumed that he would be able to go in and take Ukraine within days of the initial attacks, and that was not the case. He met much more resistance by the Ukrainian people, who are full of spirit and determination to hold on to the sovereignty as their independent nation. And that has really put a crimp in the impacts of that issue. Moving forward, we'll have to watch and see how that plays out. But it definitely, when we were talking earlier about the Patriot systems being delayed by Trump through his little maneuvering that he wants payment from Germany and the EU, of course, any delay in these defensive weapon systems for Ukraine is helping Vladimir Putin, which really is not a surprise. In my opinion, I think that Trump is just a Putin puppet anyway. So that's my opinion on the Trump issue. Now, let's move forward past that and look at other areas. Of course, we know that over in Gaza, there is ongoing fighting going on, and the United Nations has put out and sounded another alarm because of the fact that there were Israeli strikes on a Gaza church. Now, this church was attacked and 3 people were killed, at least 10 others were injured, and that was the bombing of the Holy Family Church in Gaza City. Now, I personally am not taking any political side in the conflict there because this is a war that's been going on for decades. And really, I think that to take a political stand is to walk away or turn a blind eye to the atrocities that are happening on both sides of the offensive and defensive. My stance is from a humanitarian point of view and a human rights point of view, and my concern is that neither side has been fully respecting the rule of law when it comes to war. They have not respected human rights. They have not respected the sanctity of schools, of residential areas, of focusing on the different military installations, and instead have just been recklessly bombing and taking lives of children, of women, of civilians. And that to me is the biggest concern. And that goes for both sides. Now, the RCMP in Canada recently issued a report and notification that they actually are on the ground in the region and they are investigating war crimes that are alleged by both sides. And that's something that the RCMP, along with other international investigation teams, are looking into. Unlike in Ukraine, it's a little tougher for them to get that information. In Ukraine, they have set up different portals as well online to receive reports of different atrocities, and they are much easier access to information than they are coming out of Israel and Palestine. So again, it makes it tougher. And then to bring in also into that circle, of course, Iran. So it's much tougher for the investigators on the ground, but they are investigating from both sides. They are not focusing in on one or the other, which is an important point to remember. Now, going back to that, Stephanie Tremblay, a spokesperson for the Secretary General of the UN, noted that the church was both a place of worship and a sanctuary for civilians, and went on to state that attacks on places of worship are unacceptable. People seeking shelter must be respected and protected, not hit by missiles. And that is a very, very important point, and that's something that I'm saying, is that the human rights issues and the human rights violations are the biggest concern to me on both sides. The loss of innocent lives should never be overlooked, and that has to stop. Now, too many lives, she went on to state that too many lives have already been lost. Something that I keep saying over and over is the importance of that intervention by the international community to have a complete and unrestricted ceasefire within the nations involved. And that includes all sides to just stop bombing the shit out of each other, show some respect, and get back to a table of unity where they can at least maybe not love each other, where they can negotiate some type of settlement that can bring peace and stability to the region, and that is very important. Now, she went on to highlight another worrying development as humanitarian reports are coming in that many displaced people are wary of bathing in the Mediterranean Sea after Israel reinstated a ban of swimming and fishing. And they say that for many, the sea has been their only option to wash, as there's barely any functioning water infrastructure and almost no fuel to pump water. And that a much needed outlet in the hot weather of Gaza is the Mediterranean Sea. And now they are being banned from being there for many different reasons, but it is just the humanitarian crisis that has broken out. We've seen report after report of innocent people trying to get to the aid, the little bits that are trickling through. And it is a sad state that still needs to be addressed by the international community. And the UN continues to monitor the situation and trying to take steps to bring that ceasefire to fruition. we'll watch and see how that plays out in the coming days, weeks, and hopefully not months. I'd love to see something brought forward to actually restore peace in that region before we hit the marks of months down the road. As we continue to take a look around here in Canada, let's take a look at some different strategic initiatives in terms of defense that are going on. Now, of course, we know, as we touched on, that there are concerns with trade and reliability when it comes to the United States, whom we are so closely attached. Now, the National Defense Department is actively modernizing its capabilities, particularly in the Arctic. And they, on June the 17th, just today or yesterday, depending on when you're watching the show, but they have done a significant technology partnership agreement that they signed with Australia, of all places, for the rapid development of the Canada's Arctic over-the-horizon radar system. The initiative is a crucial component of Canada's broader $38.6 billion plan announced in 2022 to modernize our NORAD system, also known as North American Aerospace Defense Command. So there is a big jump there from relying more on the US. Instead, we're looking to different technologies outside of the US, and that includes partnerships in defense with the European Union. And as you see here, the technological partnership with Australia. So again, that is a big change in direction for Canada. And we really need to keep our commitment to enhancing the Arctic sovereignty. And the reason for that is because, A, we need to ensure that we have the defense capabilities and monitoring, as we don't want to leave a big gap in our defense systems and our monitoring. Now, this is even more important as the geopolitical dynamics change and the increased activity in the Arctic region. As we know, with climate change and other impacts of different forces, that the Arctic is slowly opening up as a major potential transit way between different continents. And of course, Canada is at the lead of that. We will be able to look down the road at different deep sea ports and such way up north as the ice breaks up and the Arctic is opened up more to shipping and transportation. So again, that becomes a very key point, but it also comes at a concern of the rare earth minerals and other resources in the northern Arctic that we want to make sure are protected and to prevent others from stepping in and laying claim to any territory that belongs to Canada. So again, the Arctic is a key component to our nation and to our future. So again, we have to make sure that we are taking every step possible in order to protect it. Now, when we look at shifting directions and looking at international trade, as we've touched on already, but Canada's been actively managing the disputes with the US and other nations. A lot of people aren't familiar with the resolution of the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership. Now, that is looking at dairy tariff quotas, and that was a dispute with New Zealand, which many people didn't even realize there was. So the resolution of this specific dispute with New Zealand under the CPTPP, that highlights the intricate nature of modern multilateral trade agreements. So again, it's a matter of looking at the strategy to defend our supply management system with international trade, but also within that framework and the contentious negotiations, it's about balancing domestic industry protections as well. With our international trade obligations. So we've got to keep a fine balance there and keep a diplomatic approach aimed at preventing the escalation of the friction that brings up with key trade partners such as New Zealand. Moving on, Correctional Services of Canada is reporting several incidents, including the seizure of contraband at the Saskatchewan Penitentiary on July the 11th and 13th, at Warkworth Institution on July 9th and 10th, and additionally a lockdown at Joyceville Institution, which began on July 11th, concluded just earlier today with normal operations resuming. These incidents indicate a persistent challenge that is faced within the correctional facilities, our federal systems anyway, concerning security and control. There's also been a report of a real increase or a large increase in contraband being introduced into our correction facilities using drones. Now, in the Canadian correctional system, there are the open yards, there are exercise areas, there are fields and different areas that the inmates may have access to. Given that, of course, some may be covered by chain link fence or otherwise to prevent escapes in some facilities, but others are more open. This, of course, presents a real security challenge for those who are tasked with guarding the facilities. When the narcotics, cell phones, and other items of contraband are delivered into and make their way to the inmate population, it creates many concerns. Of course, the contraband cell phones, that creates concerns of security where the certain organized crime or other individuals could be using them to communicate with the outside to do anything from planning escapes through to controlling criminal activities, ordering the intimidation or worse on witnesses on behalf of others, and of course, harassing their past victims. There's a lot of different reasons why it is so important that this contraband be stopped. Now, taking it further, of course, we know that there is a lot of substances that get introduced into the prisons through the smuggling, whether it is through conjugal visits, just open visits, or other means. And of course, the drones have delivered a new technology for those smuggling items into the Canadian prisons. The concern, of course, is when you introduce drugs, is there fentanyl, just the fact that drugs alone, but also the fentanyl levels and whether or not there is going to be an overdose epidemic within the correctional system. You have the risk when inmates have been using drugs and are in an intoxicated state, that they increase the security risks to not only the staff of the facilities, but to each other as inmates. So again, it increases the potential violence, the volatility of the environment, which is already a very tense place to be. So again, that creates a major security risk. If there were a group to take over prison after they were using different substances, then of course it becomes a real concern for escapes as well, and the public can be put at risk. So it is a balancing act between the resources that the Correction Service of Canada has in place and what they are looking at into the future with budget cuts and cutbacks. That could be a big concern. So where are we as Canadians when it comes to wanting to spend on our rehabilitation and our correctional system? Unfortunately, a lot of people don't like the programs when they are looking at education opportunities and so forth for inmates because of the fact that people on the outside, regular everyday citizens who are paying their taxes and trying to make a life, are not getting that education that you see offered to inmates in different institutions and different programs. However, the long-term benefit and cost savings to Canadians can be very, very high. When you look at the recidivism rates in Canadian corrections, of course, we can see differing numbers depending on the different variables. Now, of course, drug addiction has become one of the predominant factors as the cause and effect for those facing sentences, whether it is for property crime or violent offenses in Canada. The other concerns, of course, are people who see the judges and the court system as an issue where they are not handing out tough enough sentences for those convicted of violent crimes or other crimes. There's, a point where we have to look and say, where are we with our current state of correction and rehabilitation? Are we really wanting to focus on the rehabilitation end? Or are we instead transitioning to a system like you see in the United States, where it's much less about correction and rehabilitation and more about warehousing inmates? And that's what you see across the border south of us. There is a major problem with that because eventually they are going to be released onto the streets where they may be your neighbors. And that can be a very concerning point if you don't offer them some alternative to the life that they've been living. If you don't offer them the skills and the ability and the confidence in order to make it in the world and to better themselves, then you're just looking to repeat the same offenses and the same problems. You're looking to put them back into the criminal element or environment in which that caused them to go to jail in the first place. Again, it can be a very polarizing issue with the Canadian public and the taxpayers to really balance that out. But I think that we really need to have open and honest discussions across the country about what we as Canadians really value and what we want to see moving forward. Again, looking at the correlation between media and the cross-border issue. Canadian media, and whether that is television, the internet, or anywhere else, is saturated with reports and other issues that come from the United States news agencies, media outlets, and individuals on social media platforms. Now, when Canadians are looking at that, a lot of times they don't take the time to do the research and understand that the system is completely different in the United States as it is in Canada. We have two different types of legal systems. We have gone under a British system, and that is a part of our history with the monarchy and with the Commonwealth. So again, unfortunately, people misunderstand, and you see it all the time with these what they call these public audits. These auditors online that are out there and getting in the face of law enforcement, hoping to catch them doing something that breaches their human rights or their civil rights on camera, and they just kind of stir things up. Oh, well, and you hear them saying, well, you don't have a right to ask me for ID. You don't have a right here. You're breaching my human rights or my civil rights, or the Constitution says this. And you see Canadians trying to tell them, oh, you're breaking the constitutional rights. And it's like, well, you don't have constitutional rights. In Canada, you have a Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which is a lot of similarities, but also the Canadian government has different regulations, different laws, and they are allowed to do different things that the US law enforcement may not. With that said, of course, the bigger concern in the United States right now is law enforcement and what they are doing in terms of immigration, rounding people up, raids, and all of that. So again, people in Canada are seeing that and getting angered and upset about it. But again, there is a certain population that thinks it's the same in Canada and gets angered and stirred up and buys into that, as well as, of course, foreign interference, which we'll talk about on another show. We'll talk about foreign interference and transnational repression by various countries, but we won't get into that today. Now, recently, over the last few days, there has been more news coming out about the small Cessna plane that was hijacked out of Vancouver Island. Apparently, this former pilot had hijacked a small Cessna from a flight school and an instructor, and I kind of chuckle because it's just so ridiculous, the thoughts of this individual that's been arrested. Now, he took possession of this plane and took it up. He flew to Vancouver and circled the Vancouver International Airport. That grounded all flights from takeoff, and also the the air traffic control put out a message of warning to any other airplanes that may have been in the skies around the Vancouver airport, warning them to be ready to make maneuvers to avoid any contact or impact with this Cessna. At that point, of course, the air traffic control, the law enforcement, nobody knew the intentions at that point of what this person, the hijacker, had in mind with this hijacking. It turns out that this former pilot had some obvious mental health issues. He claimed that Allah had sent him to save humanity from global climate change. He became a fanatic and extremist when it comes to climate change, and he was convinced that Allah was sending him on a mission to stop the airlines from flying and to really deliver a message and save humanity from climate change. And that is why he claimed to do it. Fortunately, though, the Canadian government, of course, our military, scattered fighter jets to intercept this aircraft. But before they arrived at Vancouver International Airport, the Cessna had touched down on one of the runways, and the individual was taken into custody without issue by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police at the airport in Richmond, British Columbia. And that's just a part of Metro Vancouver, for those unfamiliar with the area. So again, climate change, apparently the heat was too much for this individual's brain to function properly. And again, a happy ending that nobody was injured. On a less happy note, a miraculous story out of North Vancouver where a woman in a wheelchair was traveling on the sidewalk. A motor vehicle accident occurred involving an SUV and another vehicle where the SUV actually became airborne and landed on this lady in the wheelchair. The miraculous part is that she did survive the impact and the vehicle coming down on her. So again, very fortunate that she was able to survive that. Her actual medical condition and prognosis is not known at this time. However, we do know that she did not pass from injuries resulting there. 3 people were hospitalized as a result of that accident. But again, a miraculous story that the lady in the wheelchair also survived after the SUV came down out of the air on top of her. Now, let's take a look at some other issues. The Environment and Climate Change Canada announced that climate scientists are utilizing the Rapid Extreme Weather Event Attribution System. Quite the mouthful there, but they're using that to analyze heat waves across Canada. Their aim is very simply to determine the role human-caused climate change plays in impacting extreme heat. Also, of course, they're looking at utilizing that to predict more sensitive areas when it comes to the risk of forest fires and wildfires. We know that a lot of wildfires are caused by human ignorance and human action or inaction. And again, there are others that are caused by nature, whether it's lightning strikes and such. It's important to keep in mind that if you're out in the backcountry or anywhere else in nature, enjoy it. That's what Canada's about. We have such a vast open space of nature and wildlife and natural beauty that it would be a shame not to enjoy it. However, with enjoying it comes responsibility, and I hope that everybody out there uses common sense when it comes to preventing wildfires, because let's face it, it's not just the human cost and the loss of homes and structures. It's also the loss of those environments for the wildlife. We lose wildlife due to the wildfires. We lose their habitat areas. We lose sensitive ecological areas. So again, use common sense. If there is a fire restriction in place, please adhere to it. If you are not subject to campfire bans or open fire bans, then of course be responsible. Don't have huge bonfires. Don't have a lot of garbage in the fire that's going to carry off. And when I say garbage, I don't necessarily mean physically garbage, but I'm talking about light items such as, even just paper starting the fire. That can go up into the air and get contact with trees and other things and actually start them on fire. Even though it's not an open flame, it's enough sometimes to spark wildfires in that regard. So again, use common sense, be safe, make sure you have extinguisher or a water source to extinguish flames when you're done. Do not walk away believing that the fire will burn itself out. You also have to keep in mind that there are root systems under the ground that are impacted during wildfires. And when you go for a hike after a wildfire, when things are out and it's declared safe to do so, you need to use caution because there can be holes in the ground underneath that you don't see from root systems that used to be there that have burnt underground, and now it's just big hollows, and that ground can give in from the weight of you stepping on it and cause you injury. And so just be aware of that, because a lot of people don't consider that when they go out into the wild when the fires have been extinguished and such. Now, as I said, though, they are looking at the direct links between the climate change, extreme weather events, and how maybe this information can draw upon different solutions going forward. Now, the US has been blaming Canada for wildfire smoke, and that further highlights climate related disasters that they don't just isolate to one region, they cross borders. And I just chuckle because we actually received a letter, not us personally, but the Canadian consulate and the embassy received a letter from some Congress members blaming Canada for not managing our forests correctly, and therefore the smoke was crossing the border from wildfires, and it was impacting the quality of life of their citizens in certain border states. And let's face it, we have been dealing with over a century of smog and pollution coming up from Detroit, from Buffalo, from other parts of the US. And, that we've dealt with together and tried to find solutions. We didn't sit there screaming because wildfire smoke was coming across the border. I mean, unfortunately, wildfires do not have passports and therefore can't be rejected at the US border. Now, one solution I did have is that if the US, instead of sending all of their drugs and their guns across the border into Canada, just start sending us commercial fans and we'll plug them in and blow the smoke a different direction. But that's just the way it is. Now, when we look at other issues around the world, folks, we could go on all day, but I wanted to just wrap up here because we're running a bit behind discussing all of these different things. But a couple of different points, there are a couple of different stories that I did want to make sure we got in this evening, was that border security efforts need to be applauded when it comes to the Soyuz port of entry that is in British Columbia. They made a significant seizure of 70 kilograms suspected of being cocaine. So congratulations to them. A big haul to stop that getting into our streets. So again, great news there. As the Canadian Border Security Services ups their game in terms of blocking a lot of the substances and illegal importation of these substances. So again, that's great news to show not only Canadians that they're working hard, but also the importers and the traffickers, showing them that Canada is cracking down and that we are serious about stopping the flow of drugs across our borders. Now, we also wanted to touch on the current updates when it comes to the missing children in Pictou County in Nova Scotia. Now, there has been little information and updates going on about Lily and Jack Sullivan, who have been missing now from their Lansdowne Station, Pictou County, Nova Scotia home for several months now. It's been about 11 weeks, since they went missing. We don't know what happened to these children. They went missing on the morning of May the 2nd, 2025, and the Nova Scotia RCMP continues the extensive efforts to locate them, to figure out what's going on, what happened to them, where they are, if they are still alive. Let's hope that they are, but they are still working diligently. They have recruited other resources from other law enforcement agencies across Canada. Right now, they have undertaken a broad range of investigative actions, and they are reviewing approximately 5,000 video files that have been obtained through through a canvas of the area, both in Lansdowne Station and surrounding areas. So they've gotten all these video clips to go through, and of course, you can imagine how much time that takes to sort through, to visually look at and watch. Now, investigators are also assessing over 600 tips that they've received from the public. And they've formally interviewed more than 60 individuals, and some of whom have undergone polygraph tests. Now, we know that the stepfather, who has been seen in the media and was very active when it came to being on the ground, a liaison with the media and the searchers, and really being that public face of the case. And it is believed that he was cleared from a polygraph point of view. But again, we'll have to wait and see, because the police haven't officially given much information as they continue to protect any details that they may have for prosecution and for, of course, the ongoing investigation. Now, a key piece of evidence in the investigation is a pink blanket confirmed by the family to belong to Lily, which was found outside near their home, and that was actually seized on May the 2nd. So again, not a lot of information or any clues since that time. Police are actively investigating how this item relates to her and her brother's disappearance, and it may or may not. It could have just been there from maybe, I can speculate a million different ways, but the point being is that they still don't know what the relevance is of the blanket being outside. Now, previously, a boot print was also found in a specific search area around Garlick Road and a nearby pipeline. But again, we don't know a lot more about that because it was a single boot print. It's really difficult to kind of figure that out without any sense of direction or what it was doing there. Again, it is a sad case. Anybody who has information about the missing Sullivan children is encouraged to contact law enforcement, whether that is reaching out to the Nova Scotia Royal Canadian Mounted Police or contact Crime Stoppers if you don't want to give your identity. You can find the Nova Scotia Crime Stoppers and the RCMP contact numbers online. Just Google search them and you'll come up with that information. Now, when we've looked at this, of course, we know that despite the search efforts, the information gathered, including all ground search and rescue operations, have not identified anything new in those search areas at this time. 78 trained searchers from across the province have focused on certain areas around Garlick Road, and in their latest efforts have still come up empty. And that is a very big cause for concern. If the children had literally walked out of the house and just got lost in the bush, you would expect that given the wet weather, there would have been more telltale signs than just one boot print and a blanket. It just seems very odd that there have been no other traces of these children for over 2 months now. For 11 weeks, these children have been missing without any further details, and that is very concerning. In a bid to generate new leads, the Nova Scotia Department of Justice has added the case to its Rewards for Major Unsolved Crimes program. And again, on June the 19th, they did that, and that offers a reward of up to $150,000 for information. So again, if you have any information, even if you think it's so small and irrelevant, you don't know, because that little tiny bit of information, or that tiny little thread that you provide, could actually stitch through something else or other bits of information to bring them together to allow a breakthrough in the case. So again, if you have any information, any maybe dash cam footage, any information whatsoever, I encourage you to speak up and try to get some justice for these children, whether they have just gone missing and are located safely, or if something more sinister has happened. Again, it's all about the safety of these children, hopefully finding them safe and alive. But at the very worst case, we want to make sure that justice is served by anybody who might have been involved in this situation. So again, if you have information, reach out to the RCMP or to Crime Stoppers. The emotional toll itself has been taking a huge toll on the community, not just the family, but Pictou County is a small county in Nova Scotia in the Maritimes on the East Coast. And that is a very unsettling and profoundly impactful event on that community. Most people are right now of the opinion that the best case scenario is that somebody did abduct the children, but that they are safe. And again, that is reflecting, an opinion that maybe people are more positive in their outlook, or at least, they don't want to think of the worst case scenario, and that would be human nature. We want to try to keep our thoughts positive, and that is what we do to protect ourselves from the pain or the shock or the depression, anything else that comes with horrific acts in the community. We want to avoid that, and that's part of our fight or flight system and mechanism that we have as human beings. So again, it really underscores right now that with the lack of information, the increase to the level of the reward for information, it just really shows that there's a concrete or a lack of concrete leads and a desperate need for more information And it just implies that the traditional search methods have been exhausted without any type of success. Now, just a reminder that Lily Sullivan is age 6 and described to be 6 feet tall, weighing 60 pounds, with light brown hair and hazel eyes. At the time of her disappearance, she was believed to be wearing a pink Barbie top, pink rubber boots, with a rainbow print, and carrying a cream-colored backpack with a strawberry print. Now, Jack Sullivan, age 4, is described as 3 feet 6 inches tall, weighing about 40 pounds, with dark blonde hair and hazel eyes. He was believed to be wearing a pull-up diaper, black Under Armour jogging pants, and blue rubber boots with dinosaur print. So again, if you have any information, no matter how much you may think that it really doesn't matter, it very well could. Again, it could tie into something else that the police are looking at and just be that little crumb that brings it together. So again, just really try to picture it, try to figure it out, and if you have any information, by all means, speak up and be heard. At least get the information to the proper sources or resources. Changing direction a little bit, I wanted to also touch on the Canadian film and television industry that is seeing a decline in the numbers of productions going on across the country, as well as a big drop in the financial contribution that it makes to Canada's GDP. Now, it has been suffering a severe and prolonged struggle, described by many as the worst they've ever seen in the industry. We have seen where it has, had some quiet times and some lulls, but it's always bounced back, and it's usually bounced back bigger and stronger than ever. Now, with this bounce back expected, of course, we've seen a lot of the major studios, whether it's the Mammoth Studios and Amazon Studios in Burnaby, the Bridge Studios also in Burnaby, North Shore Studios in North Vancouver, the Martini Studios in Langley. We have a major production hub in Metro Vancouver known as Hollywood North. This is also the case in Ontario. And also, we've seen a big jump in productions going on in other regions, from the Yukon right through the prairies and even the Maritimes. A lot of provinces have been instituting different initiatives when it comes to tax incentives and grants to spur production into their areas. Alberta, as a province, has also been very proactive in introducing new incentives to bring the film industry there. However, overall, the concern is that there is less work, less productions, and less money being spent. A lot of productions have cut back with the different series that are filmed here. They've cut back on the number of episodes per season. That has a direct impact on the budgets and on the days of work for those that are employed within the film and television industry. In full disclosure, of course, most of you that do know me are aware that I am an actor in Vancouver as well. I have done well over 200 different television, independent films, documentaries, a lot of different productions, and everything from superhero shows to Hallmark, and all of the different productions that go on in Vancouver, most of the time in the background, other times just small bit roles or day player roles. But again, just in transparency, I just wanted to make sure that it's clear that I do have a horse in this race, as they say. Now, there have been the concerns that, of course, we know the COVID-19 pandemic had a huge impact on the industry, with over a year of absolutely zero productions. Post COVID, of course, then there were these strikes, the Hollywood studios, the actors, the writers, just so many different job actions that took place as well that had a direct impact on the Canadian film and television market as well. With that reduction, of course, the studios came back and they had to make up lost time when the strikes were over. So there was this little bubble of production that happened to make up for the episodes and the planned productions. But now, of course, that bubble has burst. We're back to a very slow and unsustainable level of productions for the industry. We're seeing a lot of people who work as crew and other levels or different positions within the film and production industry are actually looking to change industries and change fields because they just cannot make a living doing shows every couple of months as opposed to working full-time in an industry that's usually just a buzz. There are several productions, such as The Last of Us, that has helped to put some substantial financial contributions into the budget. Of course, the first season was filmed in Alberta, season 2 in British Columbia. So again, that helps to bring in over $100 million in production. But again, when you're looking at an $8 billion a year industry, it is just not even making a dent. Now, as I said, many people are looking at, looking at moving industries. They've exhausted their savings. They've exhausted EI benefits. They're losing their medical coverage. They are struggling with car loans and mortgage payments. People are using homes. Unions have used up their contingency funds. This is really becoming a major, major problem. As I said, even with different production hubs popping up throughout Canada, we also have a concern that people leave those regions for what's seen as the Hollywood of the North or the New York of the North, where people tend to flock to Vancouver or Toronto to get into the industry. Again, that leaves other developing areas such as the Manitoba Film Board, Creative Alberta, and others that they really need to keep that pipeline going to bring people through the system in terms of experience and education. So again, a big concern there. With that, of course, we know that the GDP in Alberta alone had a major benefit. And as I was saying, The Last of Us had actually contributed $182 million to Alberta's GDP in 21-22. Excuse me. Saskatchewan committed approximately $22 million to 36 productions via their feature film and television production grant since April of 2023. So again, different incentives and grant programs going on. But again, there's a reduction of billions upon billions of dollars in the film industry, not only in Canada, but in the US as well. We're seeing a big drop there, and it is concerning. With that said, folks, we are running a bit behind here, so we'll wrap it up at that for this week. Don't forget that we will be doing a special episode coming up over the next few days, probably Sunday, but watch social media platforms to confirm when Ron James finally makes it out of Nova Scotia, or at least the area that he's in, we'll be able to get a reliable connection, and we are so looking forward. We could have brought another guest in on the show tonight, but instead we wanted to make sure that Ron James was our first official guest on Primetime Live. And again, we are looking so forward to having this comedy legend grace our program. So that'll be coming up. We didn't receive any calls, of course, tonight, and I didn't anticipate that we would, just being the first episode. I figured it would be fairly quiet as we start to promote and get the word out now that the first episode is streaming. So again, don't forget that if you have a topic that you would like discussed, or if you have comments about what we've discussed tonight, if you are shy and don't want to do it on air to call into the show, you can call in during the week and leave a voicemail that we can refer to, and we can respond on the next program. So 368-997-6741 is the number. You have been watching Primetime Live here on Jess TV out of Lethbridge. And I'm personally in the studio in Vancouver, but we are streaming to the home station in Lethbridge, where, of course, we've also got Jesse there helping out behind the scenes. So don't forget how important his work is there. And you can also tune into the program on Roku TV, SSH 101 TV, the NCG Television Network, Meta TV, and of course you can stream 24/7 at jessfm.ca. Once again, I'm James Cousineau coming to you from Jess FM and Jess TV. Be safe out there, folks. Thank you for tuning in. Bye.